so I recently went from being a product owner to a scrum master again. I'm gonna do it every time. It's gonna be funny every time. And uh, but I also made a huge segue from going from a very small organization of like 20, 30 employees. I don't really know how many employees it actually is. 20, 30 employees to like a very large international firm with, hundreds of thousands of employees, et cetera, et cetera. And it, it, that, it, they're both working in agile ways of working. But just the stark contrast of like, I could imagine that somebody that spends their entire career with small companies versus somebody that spends their entire career with large companies, they would never understand that like these are both valid. There's both valid ways of working. They just need you. You just need to adjust a little bit to fit in these different frameworks.
Yeah, I think the larger companies tend to be a bit more regimented about their processes, right?
Yeah.
That have evolved over time. Also, when it comes to changing those up, they're reluctant to do that because this is how we do things around here, right? Whereas the smaller ones, they can experiment. So I think it's a good thing.
Yeah. I was talking to people in my first week, and I dropped a piece of knowledge. Like that's what I do now because I was like, hey, I was a product owner and I was here. I was there before. I was at the organization before, so I didn't have such a steep uphill climb. Uh, but I'm on a new project now with people I have not interacted with, so they don't know me at all, right? But I know their corporate culture. So when they were talking to me about like, well, how can you be how can we be successful as a group, and what changes can we make, and what can we keep doing, and we had some basic like introductory stuff that you do when you start a job, and I dropped just out of the blue, like I dropped a piece of knowledge on them that like I didn't even realize that my brain was holding, which was I told them I have just come off of an engagement with a client. With a client was very small, and because the client was very small, I was able to basically do everything myself. I was like the product manager and the product owner. I was coupling with sales and marketing and these guys to figure out what they need. And I was talking to customers, and I was adjusting the roadmap, like the leadership level roadmap for the product, and helping them set the vision for the product and all that kind of stuff. All that stuff. I was there. So like for people who this is the first time that they're listening, I was a product owner, the first product owner for a startup company. And the first product owner for a startup company, this could be a whole podcast by itself. What things to do when you're the first product owner. Like you've got founders of the company, and then they take the product to a certain point, and then the product blows up to a certain point. Now they need somebody whose sole job is just the product. That first person who comes in has to deal with like, especially when you have multiple founders, that person has to deal with like consolidating, getting their arms around all these different, all these different viewpoints and opinions and goals and hopes and dreams or whatever these people have, and kind of bringing them all together and teaching them to, while forging ahead for the business, teaching them how to work together, and helping them understand that like having one person to go to who can make the roadmap visible and who can inspect and adapt as they learn things as a business together. That first person has a very difficult job as a product manager.
Absolutely.
A very difficult job. So
it's actually one of the most difficult roles, I believe.
Yeah.
As it is, the product owner's role is difficult enough. Mm-hmm. But if you're in a startup situation and you're trying to establish the backlog and trying to set the direction for the company, really, it is difficult.
But like we should target that one and do a podcast just for that. Like I'm the first product manager coming in, product owner, product manager coming in. Like, what's my strategy? Where do I start? What do I not do? What do I do? You know what I mean? Like for me, this is not the intent of this conversation, but we're gonna go down this road because we're here. Like. That for me, like the thing I did that made the most impact was I got everybody in the room. But you can do that in a small company. I got literally everyone in the room.
They would fit.
Yeah, well, fit or not. Like I had some people on the phone because they weren't there. They weren't there physically because it was still COVID.
They'll make time.
Yeah, but I got everyone in the room, and I got all of their all of their desires. Like I got their view of the future out and down on stickies. Basically, that's what I did. I took a whole wall and I stickified it. I don't know. It's not a verb for that. But that's what I did. I got everyone in the room, and then we all talked about the different ideas and what was most important. And like I don't remember how long this exercise took, but I remember very quickly once all the ideas were on the wall, I segmented them by product lines, which they weren't doing before. They're like this is our like let's say for example like our website offering, and this is our mobile offering or whatever, and something should match but something should be different, and this is the offering we have for this set of customers, and this is the offering we have for this different set of customers that are not the same as these guys, so they don't care about the things that they and anyway I drew some product lines of like these products are used by these customers, these products are used by these customers, and we very quickly, after I grouped the cards, the leadership they really very very quickly agreed on priorities. Like I was shocked almost that prioritization went so quick. Everybody was on the same page. So like I feel that was like a day. I was done with that. By the end of the day, I had all that stuff and I had it all done up and in my whatever requirement management system that you choose that may or may not suck. Maybe Jira. It could be Jira. It could be any system.
Jira.
Could be Jira.
Could be anything.
Could be anything. But by the end of the day, I represented everything that we did and the prioritization and all that, and I was able to say, this is your roadmap. This is a roadmap that we all agreed on, and everyone agreed on it. Everyone was there. It's not like people weren't represented in the meeting. Everyone was there, and they had a voice, and they all agreed very quickly on what the priorities for the business were. And then we started marching forward with that.
I feel like that is often either not done or done poorly at most organizations because they just want to get people's hands on keyboards.
Yeah.
I just recently come across that with a client where things like PI planning were frowned upon because leadership thought, what a waste of time. People are just in meetings for half a day, right? Instead of coding. So we were asked to basically eliminate that. And I'm thinking, this is a risk reduction strategy. If they don't collaborate, what do you think they're going to build? We're going to have a Franken application, right? Franken-monster. They need to speak to each other. And you've got 6 or 7 teams. They can't just do things in a vacuum. So I think a lot of times it depends on the expectations that these leadership level people have. And we started off by saying the stark contrast between a small startup and a large global firm.
Yeah.
I think your experiences may vary quite substantially in a large firm depending on that leadership level. If they've worked in an agile way before and they kind of understand it, they might just kind of leave you alone for a bit. Otherwise, more likely, they haven't. They were brought up working in the old-fashioned traditional way, and so that's what they want out of you as well. And so they'll come in and say, here's when we want to go live. Start coding, basically, right? And they don't want to hear about these kinds of ceremonies or events where you collaborate.
Yeah, but I don't. I think if you're aligned properly, like I don't want to jump too far ahead. So the situation where I came in as I was the first product manager / product, because I was also a product owner. I could have been. I think if that company were to scale, I could have stayed in the product manager position and brought in product owners under me to start carrying out my direction, my roadmap, and stuff like that. What I mean? It would because there would have been. I already came to the point where I was not able to interface with the teams and help them stay on track and answer their questions and brainstorm with them for the ideas they would come up with and stuff like that, and interface with customers and talk to customers about their problems and start bringing those problems back to the teams so that they can come up with solutions for us and stuff like that. Like the wonderful thing about working for the small company, especially for me being in that role, is that the teams didn't have to go through those growing pains where the product owners / managers are bringing solutions back to the team for them to implement. I was a big proponent of saying, I'm going to bring you the what, and then you tell me how, and then I'm gonna involve my technical lead in your discussion when you're talking about the how, just to dip his toe in the water or whatever, so he can send you on the right direction. Because we at that company we did have a technical lead, and he couldn't be everywhere all the time, but he was constantly inspecting the product as the teams developed it to make sure that it was to make sure it was in line with his technical vision, basically. That we were one of the big things of that company was microservices for everything, and the way we're not going to get into the weeds of microservices, but there's ways to do microservices poorly, and there's ways to do microservices very well. And it was a constant. It wasn't really a fight. It wasn't really a fight because he wasn't that kind of person. But it was a constant, constantly involving himself, the technical lead I'm talking about, in the technical designs in a good way, and that was desired by me. The issue is once you get so many teams running, and once you get moving at a certain pace, you need to hire another technical lead, because your one technical lead is not going to be able to get everywhere all at once. So like the scaling to me is like it's just a natural phenomenon. It's like the person you have as a technical lead needs to elevate up in the organization and needs to hire two people underneath to serve as, to carry out their vision. Just like I was talking about, a product manager splitting the product manager role, and then the product owner start carrying out my vision to 2 teams, 5 teams, 8 teams, whatever it is. In a large organization, where I'm going to, in a large organization, you can do the same thing. The problem becomes usually like the oversight, the overhead. I don't know what like a lot of people, like the word governance comes to mind for a very bureaucratic word that people use it means so many things, it doesn't really mean anything. Which is exactly what I just brought up, which is they have a bunch of, usually they'll have, at the teams that I've just come into, they have technical leads that are technical leads for business segments. So cut business segments and pretend that I said products, right? So let's say my program, let's say I'm a program manager, and my program, let's say, has 3 different products, right? Well, all those 3 different products, I have a technical lead for each product, but then I have multiple teams that carry out the actual work, multiple development teams, and probably multiple scrum masters as well, right? And maybe multiple product owners, maybe, but maybe not. So that's so at a point, like the real question I want to ask, I have to explain all this to get to the question I actually want to ask. Sorry.
No worries.
Yeah. All right. So the way that the large organization is structured is you have development teams. They are working out of one combined backlog. The backlog includes multiple products, and that's not optimal. That's not like that should be. It should be one team working out of one product backlog, not one team working out of 3 product backlogs and then picking things out. But for the purposes of what I'm talking about, we're going to ignore that for a second and pretend that it was optimal. Like I'll deal with that. I've explained to the leadership that like I am not going to operate like that. And the nice thing about me being me is like I'm not some dude who just got into the workforce like 18 months ago, where they can just be like, don't ask, just do it.
Yeah.
Just get out of here, get out of my office. I can be like, this is not the way we're gonna work. And you give me one product owner who represents that product, and then we'll tell you how many teams we need once you give me the timeline. I want to have all the work for this product done in 6 months. Well, cool. Based on how this one team works, we're gonna need 6 teams. For 6 months or whatever. And they'll say, well, that's ridiculous. We're not giving you 16, we'll give you 4. And then, we'll work it out. Anyway, wow, that was a super tangent.
But it helped, I think.
Yeah. Well,
fill in the details.
The point that I was trying to get to is you have basically you have so many leads that they all become a team of leads. You have a test lead, who's the resource manager of all the test resources across the team. You have a development lead, who's like the development resource manager for all the developers. But then each product has a lead that's like the technical architect of that product across any team that touches that product. and then probably your whole program has like a program lead, and then you have product managers who may be at a higher level than the product owners who sit with the teams. So there's like so many different layers of bureaucracy until you get down to like one team with a couple of developers and a scrum master and a product owner just producing software. So like in addition to that, you've got basically what I consider is a team of leads, that spans multiple departments in the organization.
You've just described exactly the structure on the project I'm on now.
Mm-hmm.
It's a program with 7 teams, and yes, so they've got this layer in the middle between core leadership and the development teams.
Yeah.
And to your point, it consists of a QA lead,
Yep.
a test lead. There is a
They're separate? QA and test leads are separate?
QA lead and a dev lead.
Okay.
There's a BA lead, and there's
okay.
there's also almost like a lead scrum master, if you will, as well.
I feel that could be like having I don't know about a lead scrum master being useful, but I feel having a full-time Agile coach in an organization that has that much going on, I feel that could be beneficial. It really could, because I mean they're just blocking and tackling and like taking it, like they don't really have a set agenda. They just do whatever they need to get pulled into. That could be very valuable.
It has the potential to be.
Right.
It also can go the other way, where this person is simply a glorified note taker.
Yeah.
And that can happen too.
Yeah.
So yes, it adds a lot of bureaucracy for sure, and it just spikes up the cost of the project.
Yeah, I could see a reason to have a Scrum Master lead, like a resource manager of the Scrum Masters. I would agree with, like, if I owned if I was like a director or whatever in a large organization like that, I would want to have an experienced Agile coach in that position. Be like, hey, whenever I want to hire a Scrum Master, bring a Scrum Master in, like I want you in the room to tell me if they know what they're talking about, and that kind of stuff. I could see it. Plus, this is another tangent that I don't know if I really want to get into, like the role of an Agile coach or Scrum Master, Scrum Master, Scrum Masters, their role in like leadership, because at that point they're a leader. If they don't have any teams, on a regular basis, they're just floating in the project. They're really leadership level at that point. They're lead level at that point.
They are, and to your point, what they try to do is to really kind of harmonize, processes, right? So you have the dev lead,
Mm-hmm.
and they're making sure that people are following coding standards.
Sure.
You have the test lead, making sure that people are following those standards, right? Automation, etc. So, of course, on the process side, you have somebody who's making sure that the teams are consistently following the right practices. But again, this has the potential to go the other way. If the person is not of an agile mindset, they are prone to comparing things like velocity across teams. I've seen that. Right?
Yeah, those people, like, I was sort of in that position when I was a QA manager of being being responsible for the test resources across all projects that were ongoing, and that's not the stuff you worry about, though. The stuff that I remember worrying about is I only had a certain amount of engineering expertise on the team. I had great analysts that could do as much manual testing and as much investigation, test case creation, all the basics, like basic stuff for testing. Boy, another tangent. Woo, man, I'm just killing tangents today. The basic stuff I expect out of testing is like everything that we change, I expect there to be a test suite for the product that we're dealing with, which is a battery of tests to say 100% up and down every piece of functionality. This is how to test it with test steps, right? That's honestly, that's asking a lot. Usually you start with a one-liner and then hope that your tester can come back and fill in that one-liner at a certain, like when you're actually like at breakneck pace, like that's what you really do. You write a one-liner just to stub them out, and then like maybe later you'll add steps or whatever. I was in a project once where we had to hand off the manual tests to a offshore firm to automate. So we had to make sure that all of our tests that we had in the suite. So we would look through the test suite to say this is everything it takes to this is everything it takes to exercise all the product's core functions, right? So then maybe there was 100 tests, but out of those 100 tests, maybe 40 of them had a little star next to them that says this must be run.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we had to take those 40 and write actual stuff, like click here, do this, put this, whatever, put a variable in for, data or whatever it was that you were using. And I had people that can write those tests, but then I had people that can execute and build the engineering of those tests. And it was like jockeying resources around, it's that was my whole day. And then when any fires that would happen or any projects that were behind because of QA behind, which is always like, that's a whole different battle that I'm going to stay out of right now. Like usually when things are behind in the QA step, but they're behind because something else failed, and it just happens to all be dumping off on QA near the end of the product. Like the sprint is 10 days, and development took 8 days to give you 4 things, and they're all going to dump it on you on the last day or whatever. Like that's indicative of other problems happening. But the way it shows is, QA's a bottleneck. Oh no,
I hear a waterfall there.
Yeah, I know. You're bringing back horror stories for me. I know. Well, everyone knows on the team, usually in situations like that, everyone knows how to correct the issues that are happening, but they either don't have or don't feel that they have any power to correct any of those issues. Good Lord, I don't know how you even got to this. We're down here in a rabbit hole, and I'm kind of looking out. I'm looking for sunlight. I don't see any at this point.
We're a long way down.
We're so far down. I think the way we got down here, I'm very scared for where I'm at right now. I think the way we got down here is we started talking about you have each team plugged into the program. I'll call it a program, right? You have each team plugged into the program, but then you have all the leads plugged into the program, right? And they all seem to be plugged into the program individually, but in reality, they're not individuals. Like, they all represent the leadership. We don't apply that term to individuals who are in like companion roles or like matrix supervisory roles. We don't really put leadership under their term, but they kind of are leadership. They're the technical leadership and the test leadership and the whatever. You know what I mean? We kind of like reserve leadership for like the executive sponsors or maybe people that handle the budget or whatever. Maybe that's not right, but I like the reason I bring this whole thing up is because I'm starting to think that the work that those guys do, like the leads and stuff like that, I've not been in too many organizations where the work that the leads do that may be related to the work that the teams are doing, but maybe not. Not been in too many organizations that handles their work very well alongside the teams.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And again, it's one of those roles that people aren't really naturally gravitated to.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes at that level, they're just being asked to do it, right?
Yeah, well, they're reacting too. That's a certain point of that is reacting. Like for example, we had to build at a company that I was at, we had a development environment and we had a staging environment, but we did not have an environment that was like for UAT testers. Basically, an environment that we were comfortable exposing to like early adopters or key stakeholders or whatever, like a true UAT environment. Like, it looks like production, it's got the same data as production, but it's not production. And we had to build that. So it was like, well, the team is not going to build. Like, I'm not going to put a product owner is not going to put a card on the board that says build a UAT environment.
Right.
There's not, like, the business value in that is zero. So as a product owner, and the product owner would have no idea what would even be involved in doing it. So they're not the appropriate person to do that. So in that organization, the tech lead took on that role, and he coordinated. I don't remember exactly how he got it done. I think he hired some outside people to do it for us. I can't remember honestly, um, but he basically did it, and it wasn't a thing where it was like it wasn't a thing where it was like I mean, obviously it came out of budget from the project.
Sure.
Yeah, but it wasn't a thing where it came out of budget like we did a bunch of story points and we broke it down into stories and et cetera, like a normal pointed thing. That's not how that started. That's not how that progressed, and that's not how that would finish. And that was fine. But like to most like some of the project managers I interface with, they will take a shot at Agile, like Scrum Masters and stuff like that, because Scrum Masters and stuff, they don't know how to deal with these things. They're like, well, Scrum team's not taking care of it, so it must be magic. I don't know. You know what I mean? But I'm like, well, somebody's got to build an environment. Someone's got to stand up another server or do whatever. Like that needs to be on a roadmap somewhere.
Well, it should be in the program's roadmap, and oftentimes there's a separate team that does that. Sometimes it's an architecture team, sometimes it's an infrastructure team, right? So it's a separate team that does it. I've even seen it where it's the DevOps people that do it, because they have the skill sets to do it.
Yeah.
But it is accounted for on the backlog.
I mean, it would be nice. I was in an organization once where the developers, they had actually the developers and the QA team had the skill to stand up another server. They could like run. It was VM farms.
So you can spin up a new server.
And anybody in development or QA knew how to spin up a new server, provision it, do all that kind of stuff. Like they provisioned off a template. They had templates, I remember, and anybody in development or QA could do it. So they actually could put on their roadmap to do it and give that task to the development team.
Absolutely.
But
I kind of feel though that spinning up an environment may not be the best use of a developer's time. It just depends on your teams, I guess, right?
I agree with you, but it also depends on how long you've waited, like how long you've paid that cost of delay down.
Yeah, right. Well, there shouldn't be any.
Yeah. Well,
ideally.
In my situation where it was a UAT environment, and like we had one customer being like, "You guys promised this. Why do we still not have it?" And like at a certain point, that cost of delay gets too much, where you're jeopardizing that customer now, the relationship with that customer, and then now you need your development team. Now it's worth paying whatever you pay your developers to say, "Stop what you're doing, stand this environment up." Because otherwise, you're right. It's an operations guy.
Yeah. So you're really reacting in that scenario that you mentioned.
Right.
So yeah, it makes sense.
Man, this is a good. I need to star this one for later. Like when I'm editing the video later, maybe I'll star this one and write it down on my list, because this is a good one to get somebody who like works day in day out with DevOps to talk to them about, like, because you're right. Like some of the situations like we're like, oh, we need to add a new environment, or another way more realistic scenario that happens all the time. Actually, it's happened to me in my last couple projects that I've been on. Is we want to decommission the current stage environment and put a new stage in its place. How are we going to do that? Who does that? Because all the developers, you're like, oh, you just put my credentials in a group or whatever and give me permission to the machine, and then I don't know anything else about,
Yeah.
It's just everything else is black magic. I don't know.
Yeah. So there's a lot of variability as to how that happens at different organizations, for sure. I think the smaller ones, you may have developers willing to roll up their sleeves and say, let me at it.
Yeah, I mean, career-wise, that's pretty cool to be able to, get all over the place and touch things you otherwise wouldn't be allowed to do. But I could also see where you're coming from. You'd be like, yeah, this is not coding. I'm not really interested in this.
Well, I think there's, again, it's for the larger organizations. They don't want developers touching these elevated environments, right? Mm-hmm. Because they've been strained through the security strain, right? So everybody's made sure that they're safe and secure and behind protected URLs and whatnot. So it's up to the organization. In those kinds of organizations, there's a separate group altogether, and they're not necessarily serving your team. They're serving everybody. So you kind of basically take a ticket and wait your turn in line.
Yeah. So how trying to think of I can't even think of a scaling model that deals with this, because they don't, like, they only deal with like Scrum teams or product owners or whatever. But where would you put these? Like, I guess I'm asking like the project manager more than I'm asking anybody else. Like, where would you put? How would you track these deliverables? That's exactly what they are. They're deliverables. Hey, I need like, if you were standing up a team for the first time, I need a development environment created. I need a UAT environment created. I need a production environment stood up. I need whatever. Like, these are not coding tasks necessarily, but if you're a startup, you would expect your developers to be able to,
Sure.
figure it out or whatever.
Because they're jack of all trades.
Yeah.
But otherwise, if you're not a startup, there's a couple of variations there, right? So you may have an infrastructure team that does this, and or you may just put everything in the one product backlog, and the teams work out of that backlog. There's two different models. The infrastructure team, you can call them architecture or whatever, they can have their own backlog, but the work has to be reflected there.
Yeah.
So that they can assign it to various individuals, or these individuals can pick it up.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That was what I said. That was what I said on my first day. I was like, the work has to be made visible.
Yes.
I was like, I can help you do a lot of things, but I can't help you with anything until we make the work visible. So if you have items on your roadmap that are items being taken care of by your DevOps team because they're figuring out how to do whatever blue-green deployment, whatever it is they're trying to do now, versus items that require new environments or environments to be swapped out or whatever, and that's just pure infrastructure type tasks or whatever that's going to be taken care of by another team. I was like, look, you don't need. I'm not asking you to do stories and do estimates and do whatever and send it to that team, put it on a team's board. Although that would be awesome. I was like, but I need at least a feature on my roadmap that says that I can move on from time period to time period. And I don't even need to. I don't need you to tell me, like, most, like, the best project managers that I've worked with, like, they won't let you leave the room without a date. Hey, can you have this done? They'll give you a date if you don't tell them how long it's going to take.
That's right.
Yeah, I know. Like, hey, you need to have this done by X day. And then you'll ask, why? What day you plan to go live? Well, I want to go live the next week or whatever. So my real deadline's this, but I want you done by here because I want to be comfortable, whatever.
Right.
They all do that. That's fine. Now I understand. Like when I was junior in my career, I didn't know to push back on that. That's just what they do to make themselves comfortable. That's good. That's fine. It's fine. The best project managers do that, and that's okay. But asking for a date just so you can put a date on a timeline.
I always tell those guys, pick a day that ends in a Y, and you have it.
Yeah, just throw it up there.
But yeah, some of the teams in some organizations, they will have, especially for larger projects or programs, they would have an enterprise architect, and oftentimes it is that person who is empowered with spinning up environments, etc. Because there's a cost to these. Even if it's a VM farm, there's a cost to these, right? Licensing cost, etc. So they're not going to just let developers on the mark and create environments as they feel like it.
Sure.
So that person is kind of like the sole arbiter, if you will, and he can then say, yes, we need this, or no, we don't need this, right? And they can own that backlog. You can call it whatever. Infrastructure is typically what it's called. Or architecture, right?
Yeah, I really wish I would have kicked off this this session with the bomb that I dropped on all the project managers and everyone I interface with, because the project manager's main critique of Agile teams, I'm going to switch to the wide angle for this one. The project manager's main critique of the Agile teams is like, these guys are just focused on the tiny little deliverable of their stories and their code, but like, when you go to demo, when they have a program, so they have like 5-6 teams or whatever. So when they go to demo the program, they do all their sprint reviews as one program, which I'm not sure I like that, because all the different products involved in the program kind of get muddled when you do it all together. Because a review becomes more like questions are not invited at that point. You're just trying to get through your hour or hour and a half, whatever it is. Like, you got 70 people on a call. You're just like, oh God, I hope nobody asks a question, because we're gonna get stuck in the weeds for 20 minutes and totally derail
That structure is useful though if all the teams are contributing to a common solution.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
So that way, the other teams are aware of what the other teams are actually building. So it does foster that collaboration. But if the teams are working on different products, yeah, you really don't need to do that.
Yeah, yeah. That's going to be one of the first things that I kind of push back on is like, hey, I want my own sprint review with just my 2 teams or whatever. And we'll be very, very focused on like, this is a solution. I want to actually see the solution in action,
And that's fair on the stakeholders too. Otherwise, they're kind of lost.
They're not going to listen. They're going to be working or doing whatever while the call's going on, and that's not a great way to get feedback. I mean, if the product owner is not adjusting their backlog based on feedback given by the users in the demo, you're wasting your time doing a demo. They could just demo to the product owner and you can be done, and then the product owner could just send an email, hey, this is what's changing.
Yeah, there's no feedback solicited there.
There's no feedback. The bomb I dropped on these guys was at a small organization. Like, this is what I started with. Now it's all coming back to me. This is what I started with.
Hey, the coffee's kicking in.
30 minutes ago, I started by saying, at a small organization, I was involved with all my teams, and I had my hand on all the wheels basically at the same time because I could manage everything. Even though I had a lot of teams, I could still get around. The teams, if I didn't show up or whatever, the teams knew what they were doing or whatever. And then they get a hold of me, and I would work a little bit crazy hours or whatever, but it was not unmanageable. Okay, I could still see my kids and have a good time, and I didn't do anything on the weekend. We didn't do any. That was planned at a leadership level. There's no deployments on the weekend. There's no nothing like that or whatever. Our users did work on the weekend, so our system was stable. Thank goodness. But the point of me doing that was I basically could do everything product related and roadmap related. I could basically do myself. I have my roadmap. I can shop it around to the leadership and do whatever, and it was very easy. At a large organization, it's not the same way because I have to, in order to do changes or to get changes signed off, even though I'm the product owner, I have to work all the relationships that I have in the organization to influence the opinion of the change before I can present the change and get people's buy-in to be behind the change. So what I'm saying is to boil what I just said down, which is super long-winded. Jesus. At a small organization, I can do everything myself. I don't really need a bunch of extra people. I can do everything myself and be like, this is the direction, let's do it. At a large organization, I have to leverage all my relationships with all the different department heads or leads or whatever in order to get what I need done because the bureaucracy is so large, the system is so large. I say it when I say it like that, it sounds like a bad thing. I say the bureaucracy is large. That's not the way I intended. What I'm trying to say is the system has become so large.
Right.
You can't deal with the system the same way. I even if I wanted to, I couldn't do all that myself.
It's just too big.
It's just too big. The system's too big.
Yep.
So you could spend your time. You could spend your time trying to break the system into smaller pieces. I feel that's completely legitimate, and we probably should talk about breaking the system into small pieces. Or what pieces of the product can we break between product owners in a very, very large product,
Yeah. So there's a scaling model that basically says, despite the fact that you have multiple teams, you only need one product owner, right? Less. So in less, it's one product owner. You can have proxies, etc.
Yeah.
There's something to be said for that. But the problem is now that person becomes the bottleneck. So while they have the authority to do things and they have the knowledge to do things, they don't have the bandwidth to do things.
I don't understand less. Every time, I think I understand it every time I look at it until I look at their graphic that they have for planning, and then I don't understand it again. I'm like, well, you can have 5 teams and they don't have a product owner. The product owner just rock stars into the planning and is like, do things, and then rock stars out. Like, do the teams have individual product owners in less? They don't. They just share one. right?
Right.
I don't understand. You already lost me.
So yeah, I mean, there's pros and cons, right? Both of them in this case.
Like I don't understand the pros and cons though. Like how can you not have full access to a product owner?
Yeah, so that's that's obviously the con. The pro being that you have one person calling the shots, right? So the knowledge isn't diluted across various individuals. The authority to make decisions is centralized in one person. So the idea is, at least the theory, that the decisions are made quickly, provided the person's available, which he or she is not. So that's where things get tricky. If you have 5 teams, the product owner is time slicing across 5. The loudest voice wins.
I don't understand.
Yeah,
I still don't understand. Again, I do understand the less model, but I don't think it's just an expertise thing. Like I feel like if I pulled up the little less graphic and we actually looked at it and I had somebody in the room who actually was experienced in it, I probably could very quickly come on board. I actually on some of the projects at large organizations that I've run myself, that I've been a Scrum Master myself on, I actually kind of started favoring Nexus, actually. Because it worked a lot, because the Nexus model is like, it includes the leads, like the leads and like a cross section of maybe not every single person on every single team, but like a delegate from every team in the planning, and you do sort of like a big room planning type of deal with the leads, and then they take those items back to their teams and then do their own sprint planning.
As opposed to safe where everybody's engaged.
As opposed to safe where everyone, as opposed to safe where everyone's in the room.
Yeah.
But the only safe implementations I've ever been a part of were just disasters, absolute disasters, where it was like, you've got to do these in this PI, or they came to the PI with 5 sprints worth of work, but like sprint 1 and 2 were very clearly defined, and then 3, 4, and 5 were completely up in the air. I'm like, guys, this is not how safe works. We need to plan 5 sprints worth of stuff in detail. Okay? Like in detail. And then we need to plan those 5 sprints worth of stuff in detail to our velocity. So if we don't have a velocity, or if you're saying you have to do these things no matter what, regardless of velocity, like you're already throwing out the safe model.
Yeah, and even if you did have velocity, you can definitely plan 5 weeks out or whatever, 5 sprints out rather, right? You can do that. That's fine. But the reality hits when you actually are executing the sprints, right? Things change. And now what happens? Things change for every team. Mm-hmm. So I feel like that planning that happens up front loses it after a while, because now reality is hit. So I think maybe more frequent touch points, kind of not whole day, 2-day planning maybe, right? And then come back and just true up what's going on.
Yeah, that
might be useful.
Yeah, I discovered the Scrum Master I took over for. I discovered the way that Scrum Master was doing planning was when they did a big room planning. I don't know what the cadence was. I have no idea. But I think it was quarterly. They would do a big room planning. But at the big room planning, they would do. They did a 3 and 3 model where they were going to plan in the big room. They were going to plan 3 sprints in detail, and then they were going to plan the next 3 sprints after those, but not in detail, only at like a feature level of like we think this feature is going to be T-shirt size or whatever. So the first 3 sprints they would plan in detail with user stories and tasks and all that kind of stuff, and in story points, planning to their velocity, split it up into 3 sprint, a full sprint planning, 3 sprints out, okay? And they'd commit to those 3 sprints in the big room planning, and then the next 3 sprints after that, they would just go up at like feature level to say we think these features are close to the T-shirt size of whatever it is. I don't know what it is. I have no idea. I wasn't there for that, so I'm just looking at the previous slide decks of how they were presenting the planning to the teams, and I was looking at it. I was like, man, that's kind of a neat. Way to plan. So like when you do your 3 in-depth sprints, you have the features that break down into stories for those 3. So you kind of would know how many features you can get through in 3 sprints. So maybe you can only get through 2 or whatever. So that's cool. You get through 2 in 3. You get through 2 features in 3 sprints, and then you can bring 2 more features in the next 3 sprints.
It has an advantage in that, as you said, the first 3 sprints you have decent focus on, you have visibility.
Yeah.
The next 3 are further out, in that cone of uncertainty.
Mm-hmm.
So that's fine. The issue is what happens during the 4th, 5th, and 6th week of execution, or sprint rather, of execution, right? So, everybody's got good clarity, good vision. They start executing.
Yeah.
Then they get to the point where that vision's a little bit blurred.
Yeah.
Now you've got that risk of misalignment, right?
Well, I would guess that as a part of a normal, like the big room planning kind of shortcuts a lot of your backlog sprint plannings. The big room planning kind of shortcuts a lot of your, actually shortcuts both, but we'll go with sprint planning for the purposes of this conversation. The big room planning kind of shortcuts some of your sprint plannings.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you spend so much time in the big room planning, that must be, to get 3 sprints planned, you must spend 2 days in a big room. Easy, 2 days in a big room. To get 3 sprints planned, okay? Maybe you get it done in a day. I don't know. Maybe if it's just 2 teams, maybe you can get it done in 1 day. I don't know. I have no idea. I wasn't there for that, so I would be very interested in seeing that magic happen. But I would figure the next 3 sprints that you have, as part of your normal sprint plannings and as part of your normal backlog refinements, you'd be breaking that work down and filling out your next couple of sprints, to kind of staging them out in the same kind of fashion, so that at least they were sort of like, the high level goal was pre-planned, but you can't really plan a sprint until you do a sprint planning, a real actual sprint planning.
Right, but my point about misalignment isn't for a team; it's across teams, right? So a given team could definitely stay harmonized, stay focused, etc. But what happens with work that is impacted by other teams and vice versa?
Yeah. I see.
That alignment goes fuzzy after a while.
Yeah.
And there you run the risk of creating stuff that basically ends up being tech debt.
Yeah, wouldn't that be a reason? Wouldn't that be a reason to have somebody like at that scale level? When I said like you have a scrum of scrums master, or some kind of scaled scrum master or scaled product owner or something like that, like they should have their finger on the pulse of that kind of stuff. That's the whole. If you're a scrum master and you don't have a team, you're just a scale level scrum master. Like, isn't that your entire job?
It is.
That and like making the roadmap, progress to the roadmap visible. So that one single scrum master doesn't have to just have the burden of doing that the whole time.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a joint responsibility, the scrum master and the product owner, right? Mm-hmm. But I haven't seen it done very well. Maybe I'm just limited in my experience. The best thing I've seen is that kind of thing being executed in a Scrum of scale environment.
Yeah.
But not in other frameworks.
That's so weird, because I would expect. So you have your team deliverables. This is kind of what I'm getting at. This is kind of like my whole reason for bringing this up today. I see you have a roadmap, right? And that roadmap might have. We're gonna go with the epic feature user story model from like Azure DevOps, as opposed to the epic user story model from Jira for a second, just to have 3 levels. I see like the higher level epic maybe is like encompassing of just a whole lot of work, just a ton of work or whatever. Like the feature level would be kind of where I would look to plan at a program level, because I would want to, my features should be coming fairly quickly. Maybe if not every sprint, every other sprint. That would be the way that I would look to slice my work, is so I'm delivering a feature maybe every other sprint, a full feature. We probably could talk about this. Like, let's just get over where I'm trying to go, right? Just for the purposes.
Sure.
So I would have my team's features, like the software features that my feature teams, I'll call them feature teams, are trying to deliver. But on that same roadmap, I'd have my features for that the leads are trying to do. New environments, things that have to do with of a technical nature. One of my teams is doing this with like where the logs are for an application. Like they're migrating the logs rather than like every individual application logs to a log that's like on the local machine or on a shared network resource or whatever, and then it's like putting all their logs in the cloud using a shared service or whatever. Like they have to refactor all the application logs to do that. Like
Right.
that's not really like the product. It's hard to sell a product owner on that. You really need the tech lead to come in and say, hey, if we put all our logs through this thing that we've purchased or whatever that we get for free, we're basically not using, then we don't need to worry about access to machines to read logs or whatever. Everything's aggregated. Everything, all the errors and alerts and warnings and whatever can all be in the cloud, and they can all show on my dashboards or whatever. Like that, that's a hard sell. It really shouldn't be. I sound silly when I say it's a hard sell to a product owner to invest money to refactor to do that kind of stuff.
Yeah, but I think ultimately, if you can frame it with the product owner in terms of business value, right, then you have a better shot at getting that done. So things like environments, a QA environment, okay, things need to be tested. It's a given. What about a BAT environment? The product owner could nominate some people from the business to get on that environment stage. You can call it whatever.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's I'm glad you said that because my brain can't keep anything straight right now because that was another one of my questions was you want to promote stuff to an environment and then send an alert to tell your users, hey, these stories are now available. Go look at the environment. Like that phase of time when like your product development is continuing in that phase of time, but like that phase of time is ready to kick off, like that needs to be on my roadmap because your product owner or somebody needs to be checking back with those users while they're doing their testing.
Yes.
To see their feedback and stuff. Especially larger organizations do this a lot more than smaller organizations. They have environments dedicated just to these type of users. So knowing when that environment is going to be ready for those users to start engaging. Because I was at a company one time that they pulled people off of their normal jobs. Like for example, the support staff. People that like the call center, people that answer the phones, they would pull them off the help desk and dedicate them for a week to do like business acceptance, user acceptance, business value test. I don't know, right? Everybody had. There's like a million different acronyms for it.
Right.
But they're basically doing UAT. So basically, they pull a real user off of the phones and give them to the development team for a week to do UAT. And you need to align your landing of the features into that environment on the day that those guys are ready to come over.
Yeah, to your point about larger organizations doing this well, they also have to triage what the business users are actually finding because oftentimes it isn't necessarily all bugs or defects. It's I think it should work this way, and it doesn't. Right. So I'm going to raise a flag, right?
Right.
And it's somebody's job to sit with them and say, this is how it's designed. There's also an element of training that needs to be provided to them so they know how to use the system, right?
Yeah. No, I think you had it right. I think there's somebody that should be sitting with them, watching over their testing, and we probably could negotiate on this one. I think this is where you leverage a test team. We talked in a previous episode about like your test team really should they should be up here with a function of your product ownership. They should be lockstep with your product ownership rather than like down in the weeds with development. Like, hey, I'm adding this for loop and here's how to test it or whatever. Like that's not super valuable to product ownership. But if product owner could deploy their tester to sit with the users to start kind of combing through what they're doing, like they could be triaging things. I think you used the term triage. I think you started this.
I did.
They could be triaging things to give you some metrics. This is another bomb I dropped on a large organization this last week. I was like, you guys need metrics coming out of testing to say when a user sees something and they say, oh, this doesn't work. I was expecting it to work. The person who's in charge of kind of triaging their issues to the team should be saying, okay, well, this issue is something that the team should have caught, but they didn't catch. So this is like considered an escape defect or whatever. But this issue is something that we never took into consideration. Nobody ever thought about this path through the code or whatever.
Right.
So that's a new requirement basically. That is not an escape defect. You're not going to ding the team.
It could be a missed requirement.
Or it could be a missed requirement. Yeah. Or it could be
Totally new.
we could be discovery. It could be completely new.
Yeah.
Nobody knew the software did this.
Correct.
That's not bad. That's not bad on anybody that nobody knew the software worked that way.
It isn't bad, but I think what needs to happen is the right expectations need to be set, right? With the BATU, I'll call them business acceptance testing users, to say thank you for raising this, but this is not something that we've ever considered before. We'll put it in the backlog if that's of value to you.
Who do you tap for that responsibility?
So I like to create a small team of 2 or 3 people. Usually it is assuming you've got those core leadership team, right? So it's the QA lead, because they seem to have the most bandwidth, given that the QA team members are embedded with the teams.
Yeah.
So 1 or 2 of those people, along with 1 or 2 of the more savvy users from the user community, because they have the domain knowledge. So they can sit there and say, everything works great, except what you've populated in these drop downs is missing this one line item.
Yeah.
Right. I like to create a group of 2 or 3 people. I call them the BAT team. And I give them access to the backlog to raise these, but they're not called bugs when they raise them. They're just called observations, issues.
Yeah.
And then the team meets regularly with these 2 that I mentioned, 2 or 3, as well as maybe an architect from the team.
Yeah.
Certainly the product owner is welcome to join, and the Scrum Masters to go through them. That's the triage process, and actually discuss it and say, you're right, this is a bug or an escape defect, or no, it isn't. It's exactly how we implemented it. Now you want it different. We understand that, so let's talk about that. So I think that negotiation and the discussion is very valuable.
Yeah, I've seen it done. Different ways. I've seen it done where you don't want them to put it in the system, so they end up keeping it in like spreadsheets or stickies or whatever.
I don't like that approach.
I don't like that approach at all either. But I've also seen it where you put it in as bugs, but you keep it in a certain area or whatever in the system, or you put it in as bugs, but your metrics don't count bugs that are in a certain category because you have a bug category. Like Jira had this, VSCS has it. They all have it.
Yeah.
You have a bug category that says like this is a user reported bug or this is a escape defect or whatever, like category of bug. I kind of would. I think my personal opinion is to send them to a bucket where it's like a bug that has not yet been triaged, and bugs that have not been triaged yet do not count on your metrics. That's kind of where I would, because you can take a bug in any system, Jira, VSCS, whatever it is, you can take a bug and you can convert it back to a story.
Sure.
To say that and then it won't show on your bug metrics or whatever.
Yeah, I usually track those with a tag. Right?
Yeah, some kind of tag.
In VSDS that just says found in BAT, something like that.
Yeah. I asked my users that as well. I was like, do we keep track of the things that are being reported from the users, directly from the users, as opposed to things that we found ourselves or things that are escape defects or whatever? Like escape defects, they have a way to see because they have the bug reason category or whatever. But I was like, just suggestions. Because a suggestion might not stay a bug. It might get turned into a story.
Sure.
And they didn't. Of course, they didn't. They didn't have it. But I think that's valuable metrics for you to have. A small organization or large doesn't really matter. It's important for you to know like X percentage of what we work on is directly from user feedback.
Yes. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean you actually have to work on it. It just gets into the backlog. And then the product owner could say, yeah, that's post MVP, or, wow, we missed that one, right? Let's put that in. So that's...
But like just like technical stories, like we were talking about, if you were a smaller team and your development actually did the operations tasks or whatever, like you could start looking at your sprints and knowing like I take a certain percentage. If you had a way to categorize everything you worked on, you would know like, well, I take 10% of what everything we do in a sprint typically is directly based on user feedback, and 20% is based off of things that the technical leads want for the future technical, like Safe calls it technical runway stuff, technical runway stuff, and then 50% is roadmap related items directly off the roadmap. That would be kind of a cool way to move forward. obviously some sprints you dial up one section.
Oh yeah, the mix will vary.
Yeah, the mix will vary, but like you have targets. It'd be like,
Absolutely.
generally, I want in a sprint, 50% of what we do is 60% of what we do, whatever it is,
Feature work, let's
is
say.
roadmap work.
Yes.
Work directly taken off of my roadmap. You know.
Yeah.
The nice thing about that is it helps you plan better, because if you have a metric that says 75% of the work that we do, that's probably not good. 40% of the work that we do in a sprint is directly off the roadmap, and then the rest is all chewed up by these little bureaucratic things we have to do or whatever. You know that, like, if you're doing 100 points with your team of velocity, out of the 100 points, only 40 of it is actually planned for roadmap items. So when you give a forecast to be like, oh, I can take, the next quarter, I think I can do X and Y and Z, you already know, like, well, I can cut in half my team's velocity when I'm planning now.
You can be more realistic about things that way.
Yeah.
I feel like, right?
Yeah, I think that's an advanced skill. I think, like, I don't see a
is.
lot of people get to the point where they're using metrics to drive forward their roadmap like that.
Yeah, that's pretty rare in my experience.
I don't understand why. Like, that should be basic stuff they teach in CSPO or whatever. I mean, they should arm you for this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Absolutely.
Man. Well, we went an hour on this topic. I don't know if we need to keep beating this topic down. We stuck on the topic for like 10 minutes, and then we went all around the world.
Yeah, we did.
So I think
it was a good trip.
I think it's best to cut off this tangential topic. Is that a real word?
Tangential, yes, it is.
Well, okay. Well, Agile Podcast Questions at Gmail. Just in case you have questions.
Let us know other topics you'd like us to cover.
I would like us to cover larger organizations versus small organizations, because I feel we didn't cover it at all.
We did not. That's an interesting topic for sure.
Yikes. Well, okay. Well, that's fun.